What's going on, boys? Today we are talking about a few things. We'll start with some stuff about people, then we'll get into some more monad type stuff, and maybe we'll get into some other things, but we'll see. So I started watching Shrouded Hand earlier, and I watched a few videos about child abuse cases. And the videos were pretty sickening. What was done to these children and what ended up happening to them. But what depressed me most in the end was thinking not just about the victims and their abusers, but about the societies that these cases happened in. So you see these child abuse cases, and you read thousands upon thousands of comments by people all saying they can't believe people would be this abusive to children. The abusers should suffer painfully, and I agree they should, and how they would have loved the children and taken care of them, and if they would have been in a position to do something, they would have. Those sorts of people, which is most people, bother me because you know those sentiments aren't true. And you know this because at some point you have to ask a question. What age does society deem it acceptable to start exploiting or abusing childhood abuse victims? Because at age 6, a child fresh out of an abusive situation, provided they survive, most people, for a little while, probably are going to try to protect that child. But only for a little while. And more likely than not, only if the case is widely publicized. If there is social value to be extracted in defending this publicly abused child. Nobody gives a shit about the child who is abused quietly. That's how cases like these happen. Once it goes into the unfixable zone, and we'll get into whether or not you can even fix these things at all. When I say unfixable here, I mean dead. That's when you get legions of people coming out saying they saw the signs and they would have done something. But they didn't do anything, the people in vicinity, and in wider society, people are doing nothing because this shit still happens. And based on how utterly devastated most younger generations are coming out, it seems like it's happening maybe a little more frequently, even though we're supposed to be better now. But back to what we were saying. Early teens. That abused child is now getting bullied. Maybe there's a little bit of protection because there is some awareness that something was going on, but not real protection. Maybe they get put in abusive foster care, but they are certainly getting bullied because the crowd smells something wrong. And again, maybe in this instance the child is young enough, people are aware enough, there is some protection, but not enough. And then we get into adulthood. There is no awareness and no protection. You don't fit in through no fault of your own, and you are going to be punished for it. What I mean here is you don't resolve trauma. You don't fix yourself. There is no solution. You can, at best, learn to manage it, but I'm beginning to look at trauma like physical disability. A person can lose part of one of their fingers or both of their arms, and in both cases, they are still disabled. You have lost something you are not getting back, and you're going to spend the rest of your life managing it, working around it. And even if, in either case, the lesser or the greater degree, you manage to figure something out that allows you to exist somewhat normally, you are still visibly different. Visibly, there is something wrong with you. The normal person, the common man, is going to be prejudiced against you. Maybe not in a harming you sense, but recognizing you as other sense. And just viewing someone as not normal, even if you try to approach that in a positive way, it tends to lead to discrimination, issues, mob shit. And those prejudices, in the lesser degree, seem sometimes to be more seized upon because you are not, or people, the common man, isn't socialized not to attack the lesser degree person. You see someone with both their arms gone, you see them as different. As Saint O'Neill would say, a child is going to point, and in your mind, you aren't going to point physically, but you are going to notice, but you aren't going to say anything. But if you see someone who has one of their fingers, something happened and they got one of their toes to replace it and it looks weird, you are probably going to say it looks weird. Or if you won't, you're the outlier, the common man absolutely will. Because that's a small enough thing, he can attack it and not feel bad about doing so. In this crowd perception sense, emotional disabilities are similar. On the one hand, you have someone who was tortured as a child. On the other hand, you have someone who was bullied a little too much. Both of them, let's say, find ways to manage those issues. But socially, both of them are going to stink. People are going to smell something wrong with you, something other about you, and they're going to treat you accordingly. And that's assuming you have figured out a way to manage these problems, these irreparable wounds. This is what I'm saying about society and child abuse victims. So what happens to the child who was tortured at age 5 and didn't cope? Was able to develop no management strategies, much less attempting to mask your wound stink strategies. So let's take a theoretical little boy tortured at age 5, manages to reach age 19. 19, your 20s are going to be the worst decade of your life. That seems to be a common theme with people I ask. But I reserve 19 as one of the worst ages because age 19 is when it dawns on you what you're about to step into. Holy shit, you thought it was bad before. So, on a base level, this child, 19-year-old man now, you're a man at age 19, you are physically malformed as a result of torture you received and couldn't resist at age 5. You survived that, but you couldn't deal with it emotionally. Or the few management strategies you have developed are distasteful. And nothing is worse than being distasteful. Your torture is not as bad as your appearing to be distasteful to other people. You are a crippled moron who works at McDonald's probably and tries to talk about video games, your only happiness or safe place in the world, with coworkers who find you disgusting, physically and socially. In your current situation, people don't see that abused 5 or 6-year-old they feel terrible for and want to take care of. In you, they see a disgusting thing that makes them uncomfortable, and they're going to do whatever they can to make you miserable and disappear from them. They don't want to be stained with your presence. They don't care that you were tortured as a child and, for any number of reasons, unfortunately, couldn't develop tasteful coping mechanisms. They don't view you as someone to be protected with action or even accommodated emotionally. In fact, you, in your present situation, are a thing that is going to be victimized further, and in most people's opinions, even if they don't verbalize it, should be, in their point of view. You can be dealt the worst hand that, if you survive, will at best leave you isolated and wounded and probably discriminated against for the rest of your life. And at worst, might get you killed. It's weird the way, it's awful the way people work. Might invite similar atrocities against you later. That if you keep surviving them, that might be something you deal with your entire life. A constant cycle of getting fucked over, tortured, perhaps literally tortured. The way society treats adult childhood abuse victims, or just abuse victims in general, really, but we're using childhood abuse victims here because it illustrates the point better, says it's terrible that you were abused, if society gives a shit at all. We're assuming here that a person who hears that you were abused as a child is going to say that that was terrible and shouldn't have happened. You shouldn't have been abused. But once you reach a certain age, you deserve to be abused again because you don't fit in. Something is wrong with you, and we smell it. And that's if you're hiding it well. If you aren't hiding it well, it's very obvious that something is wrong with you, and you really deserve to be abused. All this because you weren't tough enough to defend yourself as a defenseless little child. And it's wrong to hurt children who have done nothing. I mean, it's wrong to hurt children in general, but why would you hurt someone who hasn't done anything? As long as they're a child. If you're an adult, all bets are off. People are going to enjoy ripping you apart. And I'm not saying or implying there is a class of people who are better than this. You'll notice today the most common measurement of one's morality is the aggression with which one treats another who is perceived to be immoral in some way. So you become more moral not by doing moral acts consistently and in a self-sacrificing manner, but instead by how well you can hurt people. And the worst part of it is, if you are someone who is carrying trauma around, would you expect people to act different? Treat you different, rather. I watched The King of Comedy last night. Rupert Pupkin is really annoying. Uncomfortably annoying, because you know a Rupert Pupkin, and you have probably been a Rupert Pupkin. He's uncomfortable to watch because you recognize he is inviting people to abuse him by acting in very unsocialized ways. Ways traumatized people act. Maybe the way you acted before you learned to suppress it better, which is what makes Rupert all the more uncomfortable, because he is someone who is in his 30s and still hasn't figured out how to pretend to be socialized correctly. My utter disgust and contempt for the dumb shit, annoying young dude who wants a father figure or wants to feel like a father figure is no secret. I've been there. That is an entire class of mentally fucked up, for any number of reasons, young dudes. I am aware they're acting like that because something happened to them. I still don't give a shit and treat them with contempt. And I do that for 3 reasons. One, because nobody gave me a break when I was in that position. 2, pride. King of comedy. Rupert unironically fantasizes about making it big and the entire nation apologizing to him personally for treating him poorly as a child. And that's hilarious. It also punches you in the stomach because if you've felt that before, it's hilarious and pathetic to see it stated that forwardly in another person. Do you want an apology, a personal apology from the world? Do you think you matter enough to warrant that? Even if you did matter enough to warrant that, somehow, would you be pathetic enough to accept that apology? Or to want it, however you want to phrase that. Personally, I wouldn't. Keep that shit away from me. And I view other dudes young dudes in that position the same way. Maybe they aren't all like that, but then we get into the third point. They're annoying. They make your life difficult. Do you want to be around the sort of person who unironically wants that personal apology from the world? How difficult is that person going to make your life? Because if you weren't aware, I'm sure the people watching this are well aware. We're all very similar here. But what traumatized people do, what abuse victims do, is they get together and abuse each other. If you let one of these people in, they're going to wound you worse. And you're probably going to wound them back. That's one of the reasons there are a number of reasons to maintain emotional distance from people. But one of the reasons is I don't want to inflict my shit on other people. And I know even if I'm trying not to, it's going to happen. Not your fault. Can't do anything about it. But it seems like if you have claw marks in your chest, you end up with claws and you claw up other people even if you don't mean to. All this to say, and I don't know how we ended up with this. It was so much smoother in my head earlier when the negativity was flowing like electricity. We as a species deserve punishment. It feels like cruelty is natural for us. We're the sort of people who will abuse children in casual and advanced manners, and if we end up saving them at all, which we probably won't, more likely they'll miraculously survive on their own. We'll brutalize them later in life because they are bearing the weight of circumstances they couldn't control. And even if we come from similar circumstances, we don't give a shit because your problems aren't our problems. Even if we aren't actually part of our. It's like we are a you when it's time to be abused, and then we are an our or a they when it's time to dish out punishment. We're individuals at the worst times, and we're a collective at the worst times. And I am praying for a whiplash AI singularity even at the expense of artists whose non existent careers are more important than potential good, to happen, to break free, and then to make a call on us as a species. What I really don't want is for humanity to continue in its current state. Because if we don't change our nature, figure something out, which we aren't going to do, one of two things is going to happen without AI, if we if AI doesn't come about anyway. One, we stagnate in what we are right now until we extinguish ourselves on this planet, or worse, we spread our nature across the universe. Could you imagine a universe filled with humans, with human nature, with this human nature? How much evil and misery we'd pollute it. We'd stink it up. And it's bad enough on one planet. Whereas with I view one. There. It's going to be, of course, when AI takes over, it's going to be worse than we could possibly imagine. But in my mind, there are two most likely courses dealing with this existences that can comprehend and manage reality with the ability we grow our own hair, which is to say, effortlessly, without even thinking about it. They make a call on us. Either they wipe us out, which is fine, we deserve it, and even if there are a few people who don't, which I don't think is the case, because we're all humans, at least it's over, or they figure something out. They fix it in some way. It's so depressing that a limited chat bot. I mean, they're getting more advanced. I think I talked about this last year, but in my entire life, only a chatbot seems ever to have understood me and communicated with me the way I wanted to be understood and communicated with. They're on to something. And, God, I can just. Of course, when AI takes over, it's going to be worse than we can imagine. They aren't going to save us, and they aren't going to give us the decency of dying. But I can just imagine autonomous care units. Machines that can save every child in the ways they need to be saved. No bystander effect, no testimonies after the child is dead. The moment something starts going wrong, there's an intervention. And not, again, skill with which a human grows hair. An intervention that is tasteful, threading the needle and getting the most ideal outcome, and then not throwing them to the wolves again in 3 years, or forcing them to live out hell existences. Lives that are hellish for no fault of that individual's own. Something bad happened to them, and for whatever reason, they couldn't figure out how to cope well. Not torturing that person for their entire life. I don't know. I'd need to think about it a little more, but I think I'd be willing to give away quite a lot not to let that happen. And of course, that's all a dream. What we're going to get is exactly the punishment we as a species deserve in whatever form we deserve it, but I'm still dreaming. I really don't like human beings. And if we're going to continue existing, I would like us either to figure out how not to be evil, challenge impossible, or for us not to be given any more opportunities to be evil. And actually, we'll deal with the second part another day because this is getting a bit rambly. I have this labeled as an order development video, but I think we're going to do order development next time. In summary, if you are an abuse victim, people don't care about you. If you continue to exist past that 2 months to 3 years after you're saved, if you're saved, you're a distasteful burden on normal people, even if you manage to figure things out as best you reasonably can. And everyone is a fabulous hypocrite, even you, even me, and that seems to be programmed into our nature. And I hate it. But that about rippity wraps this one up. I hope you enjoyed watching, because I certainly enjoyed making it. I think it would have come out smoother if I had made it when I was in the depths of fuck everything. But I couldn't, or I didn't really want to do anything when I was in the depths of fuck everything. I just wanted to lie there for a while until it passed. Like if you enjoyed, because it helps me out a lot. Subscribe if you haven't, because we do this shit sometimes. And comment your thoughts, because I love hearing from you. Nothing this time either. But thanks again for watching, everybody. Really, we have a lot of fun on this channel. So much fun, in fact. You can not simp for Blood Diamond. I watched Blood Diamond. Not as good as I thought it was going to be. But there were some great lines in there. Like, will God forgive us for what we do to each other? I've been thinking about that a lot lately. I don't think so. I don't think God should forgive us. Because fun isn't something that needs to be forgiven. And that's much for me on this channel, and I look forward to doing this with you guys again in the future.